And I'll let you know how that, where to find that towards the end of the presentation. So I am going to deny that. We're limited to 500 attendees, and we have not reached that threshold. It's been a couple of years since we've come close to that. So hopefully everybody can get in. If you can't, for whatever reason, I will give you instructions about how to watch the recorded video online at the end of the presentation. I'm keeping everyone muted. If you have questions towards the end, we'll have a few minutes for some Q&A at the end. We'll try to use the chat here, and I'll get through as many as I can at the end, and we'll see how far we can get. If we don't get to your questions, or if you have questions that you want to ask, I'm going to put my email will be available on screen. Just shoot me an email at the end. A lot of you will have a question about how to document attendance in this. I will also give you instructions about how to do that towards the end as well. There's I think a lot of other states demand some kind of physical proof. Nevada we do not. We only require that you report the 1 hour that you attended. You can get the 1 hour through a variety of means. You literally can read the statutes and regulations on our website and fulfill the requirement. You can attend this webinar, or you can watch one of the recorded videos. All of them will count equally for the 1 hour that's required by statute. So anyway, what else do I need to do? I'm gonna let me introduce Ed. Ed McGuire is a retired city engineer for the city of Henderson in Nevada. He currently handles professional standards for the board, which entails interpreting and applying Nevada laws as it pertains to compliance investigations. His experience affords him a unique understanding of Nevada laws, which is the subject of today's webinar. So with that, I will turn it over to Ed. He'll get started, and I will mute myself and be available towards the end. Okay, take it away, Ed.
Thank you very much, Derek. I appreciate it. And for those that don't know Derek, he's a full-time employee of the state board. And like he said, he runs the slideshow behind the curtain. He's the wizard in the Wizard of Oz. He puts together the slideshows and our public outreach and does an amazing job. So I'm your talking head for the next hour. And if this is interrupting your lunch, you don't have to stay. Like Derek said, it will be recorded. It's available as long as you promise you viewed it between now and renewing your registration. So without further ado, we'll jump right into this. So we're covering NRS and NAC Chapter 625, the statutes and regulations. So the statutes are the laws. NRS is the Nevada Revised Statutes. Those are the laws of the state of Nevada, generally voted on and approved by your legislature. The administrative code is put together by staff, legislative council bureau, and that sort of thing, and state board and state board staff. When we get questions, comments, and recommendations, we will visit NAC and make recommendations for that code to be changed. And they both have a formal adoption process. I won't get into that, but the good news is it's available online for free. And you can also get a printed copy. We've got a picture there on the screen. I have one here somewhere on my messy desk, close by, because it's very handy. I don't know where it is. Here we go. There we go. Everybody can get one. You just request it through the state board. Your dues pay for the publication of this. So we update it every time there's a legislative session or changes to the regs, and we mail them out at no additional cost to you. So take advantage of that. Nevada is a licensed by discipline state per NAC 625.220. We license a number of categories. Basically, we're an NCEES state. So we use the standard model, if you will, typically 4-year degree, 4 years of experience, take an 8-hour exam, generally take the fundamentals of engineering first, get some experience. But we have all these classifications. There are more if you have a specialty license, or if you're licensed in multiple states and they call it something different in the other state. Feel free to reach out to the staff. We're not doing this to somehow limit the number of license types, but we do license all those that have NCEES exams available. All right, the unlawful practice of engineering, NRS 625520. This is really why we exist. I won't read all the statute, but unlicensed practice, there's a number of obvious examples. People from other states that might be licensed in a foreign country or in another state, but they're not licensed in Nevada. That is unlicensed practice in Nevada. There are a few exceptions. You can be an expert witness. The court has said any licensed engineer can be an expert witness. So this works both ways. If someone wants you to testify in a neighboring state, you are probably appropriately licensed to do so, but check in with the attorneys in those states. But Nevada specifically, quite often we'll get expert witnesses from out of state. They're not necessarily licensed in Nevada, but maybe that's okay. We don't have a conflict with, they're not a local participant in the board. They're probably not active in the local ASCE, NSPE, Society of Mechanical Engineers. So they generally don't have a conflict of interest. But anyway, the stuff we worry about are those that are not licensed at all, or those that are licensed in another state, or the one that gives us the most challenge is those that were licensed in Nevada and let their license lapse. So you're in violation if it lapses. We want you to get renewed as quick as possible. It's always better to self-report and say, I just realized my license lapsed on the last day of December, and I stamped one set of plans in January, because that will be the very first question. Basically, those plans were stamped by an unlicensed engineer. So if it's a short lapse and you get everything up to date and all your PDHs are up to date, that's the simplest solution. The worst case, we actually had this happen. Someone let their license lapse and realized no one noticed, or they didn't think anyone noticed. So they continued to practice for 10 years, and their employer realized that they were making a submittal, they were putting together a proposal, something, and someone verified. And this person hadn't been licensed in 10 years. So it was sort of self-reported. Their employer called to verify. And so basically we had to look backwards at all those projects that they had signed and sealed and make sure that they were competent at the time, that nothing else had changed. Of course, they weren't paying dues. They also weren't turning in PDHs. So there was questions about competency and that sort of thing. So please keep up with the dates. NRS 625520 covers the unlawful practice of engineering. Hang on, I got more to this slide. So if we see someone that doesn't have a license, impersonating an engineer or misleading the public, that's covered by the statute. You can't offer the services, you cannot market services that look like professional engineering without having a license in the office. The first thing we do is generally we have a cease and desist letter that describes the statute, points out where they may have a problem, and we immediately send them a cease and desist. For most people and most firms, that solves the problem. They say, oh, sorry, and fill in the blank, in Arizona or in Utah or wherever I used to live, or I live right now, but I have a client that started working in Nevada. I thought I was okay to do that. And oh dear, I think I forwarded on accident. Sorry about that. Second step would be we can go to district court and get a more formal cease and desist. So generally is not a problem, but we have had engineers, and it's usually a neighboring state, client says, I bought some land in Nevada, can you do the same thing? And their favorite engineer in the neighboring state puts together a set of plans and then realizes they haven't applied for a license. So this cuts both ways. We coordinate with the neighboring states all the time. So make sure if you're working in a neighboring state that you take care of that licensing over there as well. NAC 625-610, being in responsible charge. This is basically something we look at every time we get a complaint. Who is in responsible charge? And it's that person that stamps the drawings and signs the drawings, and we need to make sure that they are involved in the design and they are knowledgeable of that final design. So it's not illegal to have someone else help with design or drafting, but if you're going to seal that drawing, you better review those drawings closely. Make sure that if there's any preference items that you would do, the recommendation is make them your own. So if someone asks questions, tell me about the job, you have reasonably intimate knowledge of that job, at least of the design calculations and that sort of thing. And we had and this complaint is not recent, but we had a complaint. It was an electrical engineer, and they did a set of school district drawings, and they had done a number of school projects. So they assigned one of their office staff, let's put this package together. It's just like that other school. He misunderstood which school, basically copied and pasted the first design, and the guy that sealed them didn't review it, signed it and sealed it, submitted it, and both their client and the reviewing entity are like, this doesn't make any sense. It's the wrong location. So it really wasn't a matter of negligent design. It was the wrong design was submitted. It wasn't closely reviewed, but it was stamped and submitted. So that turned into a problem. We've had this in survey where you rely on a field technician to collect data generally. And there was a survey that was done with a young technician and basically did a terrible job. And the surveyor just took the numbers, put them on a map, stamped it. And they didn't discover this until construction. And we all know it costs 3 times as much to fix it during construction. It was off horizontally by feet and vertically only by inches. And it's usually the other way around. If you get the property lines accurate and the dirt surface changes a little bit, it's usually illegal dumping or something. But in this case, horizontally, it was off by feet and caused a lot of rework, potentially trespass, other problems. So important to review that stuff closely. Next is professional engineer versus structural engineer in Nevada. It's described in NAC 625.260. I won't read all this, but civil engineers can do some structural engineering. And when it gets too tall or too critical, you need a structural engineer. They take a different exam. So the general civil, you're covered for 3 stories or 45 feet. And radio tower up to 100 feet. And we have had special cases, people that specialize in transmission towers and that sort of thing, and they're licensed in multiple states. So this one does get reviewed by board staff from time to time, but that's what the statute says. So, stay in your lane then.
Hey, Ed, I'm going to mute all for just 1 second, and I'll be right back. Hang on.
Okay.
Are you there, Ed? You should have.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I was hearing somebody's phone ringing, and
that was ours on my computer. Sorry.
Oh.
Because I'm unmuted. Yes, it's our voice over internet phone.
I apologize. I apologize for accusing anyone. We're the guilty party. You might want to just turn your Teams off. Anyway, Continue.
Okay.
I was going to make one comment about
Sorry.
the SE. We get a lot.
Okay.
I man the phones here, and we get a lot of people that from other states that, typically East Coast states, where you can practice any engineering discipline that you feel competent in practicing. And
Yes.
they get to Nevada and they get a little disgruntled when we tell them, sorry, you haven't passed the 16-hour SE exam. Therefore, you cannot practice structural in Nevada. So that's the one question we get a lot. And just
Right.
FYI, right now they are considering expanding the SE exam from 16 hours to, I've heard rumors that it's 21 hours, although it could be as many as 23 or 24 hours. So it's it's going to be a much longer test. So anyway,
Thank you.
stay
All
tuned
right.
for that.
All right. Okay, next. NAC 625454, a written contract. So I review complaints amongst other things. And this is one of the number one reasons. And the statute's very simple. And we get a lot of questions about, why did you add this? And why do I have to do this? It's been in the code for, I think, over 10 years. And because it's a most common complaint, right? Your client hires you for the expertise. They want you to guide this, and they don't necessarily know what to include in the scope or what not to include in a scope. So they presume that they always presume it's all inclusive. And there's only 4 items. This is relatively simple. The scope of work, the cost for the completion of the work. So the what, the how much, and then the dates, the when. And it used to say a date. And that's really hard, right? To say, well, if we ink this deal today, I think you'll be able to move in by Christmas. So we changed it to some sort of schedule of completion. So you can list that in phases. 50% design will be done 60 days after we receive architectural drawings and the client's approval, or 30 days after I get entity comments, I will turn those back in. So you can put a window of time that you think is reasonable rather than a specific date. And the final is just an insurance, a disclosure as to whether you currently maintain professional liability insurance. You are not obligated by state law to have liability insurance. You probably are by many entities and customers. We don't require it. Because this comes up, we just require that you disclose it. So you can simply say, and I maintain professional liability, or I do not have professional liability for this project. Please complete those 4 items, because when we get a complaint, the first thing I ask for is a copy of the contract. Because quite often the complaint is something that's not in the scope. So if you have a complete scope, that protects you. If you have a complete scope and you're not completing all the work, then it protects your client. So pretty straightforward. And it will cover both private work and like government work, where we say we want a 30, 60, 90 kind of a submittal. You don't put dates. Usually you put a number of days, 60 days for a 30% submittal. If the entity reviews it in 21 days, you'll have the 60% submittal, 90 days after that, whatever that is. So we hope that covers a little better. I know engineering covers a super broad spectrum. A lot of our special inspections and geotech, they say, I'm completely reliant on a contractor and an owner. So put in there things like, you'll notify me 2 days before you start grading, and you'll call the day before for special inspections, and I will have the final inspection report done, whatever the right number is, 30 days after the last inspection. When we get complaints about, I can't get my final inspection, sorry, my cat's coming, can't get a final inspection or something. If it's been 6 months, I'll say you're probably late. But if it's been 3 days, I tell them it's not quite ready for a complaint. Your scope says you'll get it in 30 days. So keep that one in mind. That is a very common complaint. Next, relation with employers and clients. So much of our regulation, we regulate the industry, and we also protect the public. And the cat is back. I'm gonna have to sit down. So this is another common, when you read complaints, this item number 1, 625.530.1, act in a professional manner as a faithful agent or trustee for your employee or client. So it's really about, I'm paying an expert to do X, Y, and Z, and I don't feel like I got what I paid for. So keep that in mind. Once you've signed that deal and they are a paying client, even when they're a pain in the neck, you've got to be a faithful agent. This often works sort of in your defense. That's probably not the right word, but sometimes we get complaints from entities that say, I have an engineer that just wants to argue, and I don't think he's not acting very professional. He or her not acting very professional. And then when I say, well, what generated the argument, if you will? And quite often it's plan comments that they disagree with. And I say, well, at the same time, they're a very faithful agent. They're protecting their customer from what they view as an excessive cost or effort. So, cuts both ways. There's actually nothing in the statute specific to professionalism. That in itself is not a complaint. It has to rise to gross negligence or lack of faithful agent or lack of protecting the public. So let's see here. With that, this one mostly comes up for surveyors. It specifically says surveyors in the statute, though it should apply to all design professionals. If you need to enter a piece of property, here's the whole thing spelled out, but basically you need to give them reasonable written notice. If you don't know the owner and you're not able to talk to the owner or they're not on site, send it in writing. If you've knocked on the door and no one answers, make a door hanger. Nevada Association of Land Surveyors made a door hanger template that meets the requirements. They sell blank ones in little packages, or you can reproduce it yourself. There's no magic here, but make sure you leave something in writing in advance of entering. And this comes up a lot if you have to look at a water course, a survey monument. It's almost always at the back side of the property. Not generally a problem if you're in public right of way or looking at a street or something like that. But put it in writing. We get a lot of people that say, well, I thought they knew I was in the neighborhood, so we climbed over the fence, we found a monument, and then we get a complaint that there was 2 strangers stomping around in their backyard with what looks like a yellow camera, which is normally a piece of survey gear, not a camera, but makes a lot of people nervous. So put it in writing, be reasonable. If they say, hey, I want to be there, does Thursday work? Be as reasonable as possible. At the end of the day, you can't be denied access to something like public drainage or public, survey monument, that sort of thing. Those are public improvements that we need to get you access to do your job. NAC 625680, disagreements concerning monuments or measurements. This is written specifically for surveyors. I would say it really applies for engineers as well, at least casually. We see this all the time with survey information. We get complaint that property owner says, my surveyor says everything's fine at my house, but the surveyor next door says it's different. So I'm lodging a complaint because my guy or gal has to be right. So we do not adjudicate boundary line disputes. We just make sure they follow the statute. If one notices a discrepancy, they are obliged to tell the other, hey, I got a different measurement. I found this monument and I disagree with the positional accuracy. If they can't work it out, sometimes they go, oh, you're right. I think something got damaged during construction. I did my survey 2 years ago and there's evidence of recent construction and potentially it got moved. If they can't work it out and you both record a record of survey that are different, that's not ideal, right? Because we create some cloudy stuff in the world here by recording 2 surveys that don't agree. But if you're both absolutely sure you're accurate, then you've got a client and you've got a job to do. So if there's an actual boundary line dispute, we get these complaints all the time and say, you really need a real estate attorney, and this requires a judge's action to fix it. So we avoid it whenever possible, but it does occur. Let's see. NAC 625-550, agency submittals. Anybody that's a consultant or works for an agency, this has got to be one of your favorites. So there's some words about lack of competency, incomplete design. So it used to say 3 or more reviews shall be reported to the state board. And I worked for an entity for 30 years, so I know that we ignored the shall, because big complicated jobs might take 5 or 6 reviews, but simple jobs should take 1 or 2. So that was changed to say, I can't even remember exactly what it says now, excessive. So if it looks simple and you're not answering the comments or adjusting, that can be reported to the state board after a single submittal. In other cases, it's something you're working through with an entity. That's up to the entity. If they're making progress, it's not about the number. It's about whether you're addressing review comments. So we've got some ugly case histories here about people that try to bully reviewing agency employees, wasting staff's time. We've all heard of design by review. You want to get yourself in line, so you submit early because it takes a long time and you just bog down the system. So, so sometimes it's competency issue. Sometimes it's just sloppy work or poor workmanship or not following the rules. You need to submit complete submittals. So to this end, this came up in the PAL committee, the public, what does that stand for, Derek? The public liaison. What's the A stand for? Public agency liaison committee, right?
Yeah, I think it's public association liaison committee.
So we have the professional organizations and some of the entities come to this committee, led by one board member. And there was conversation about incomplete submittals by one of the entities. Happened to be one of my coworkers at the city of Henderson. So I was voluntold by a member of the board, city surveyor, Michael Kidd. He said, wouldn't it be great if we could work on this? So I think I was assistant public works director at the time. And Jamie Fitzgerald, he's the manager of land development plan review at the city of Henderson. The two of us were co-chair. Interesting, Jamie is not an engineer, but he's been doing this for a long time. So so the two of us polled the rest of the industry, had a number of meetings, and took input from consultants and all the other entities that that wanted to respond, and put together this best practices guide, which is available free on our website. And we did a lot of research, and it shows that from multiple industries, not just civil engineering, but many industries, it's been proven a little bit more time up front to be complete. And there's my phone again. Will save time and effort, which equals money overall. So the guide is out there as a reference, both for agencies and professionals. One of the other key things we found out, many of the comments that we make back and forth are not code compliance, they're preference. So it may not be a violation of the statute if it's an entity preference or a plan reviewer preference. And that really jumped out, being involved with the plan, both having been a designer back in the good old days and submitting to an entity, and then being at the entity and having people reviewing plans frustrated. You realize that a lot of the back and forth is about preference. It's not really about public safety. It's not about, code violations. It's about, we just like to do it in this order. And one of the challenges we have, all of us, if you work for a consulting firm, you potentially work in multiple entities, and trying to keep all those preferences straight is difficult. And then when you work for an entity, we're not always sensitive that other entities ask for different things. And So sometimes you get something that's absolutely the way they like it at the entity across town, and it looks foreign to you because they put their sheets in a different order and they've requested things in a different manner. So keep that in mind. Is it, number one, is it worth fighting about? But number two, is it just a preference, or is it really a code violation? We are very interested in code violations and negligent work, but I prefer to stay not involved in matters of preference. NAC 625.610, digital signatures. One of my favorite topics. So we're all familiar with the good old fashioned rubber stamp and ink pen. You write your name and the date and now your expiration when you seal a set of documents. But during COVID, everybody was talking about going digital for years, but COVID really kind of hit us in the face and forced us to change the way we do work. So nearly all the entities have some form of we do digital. Some are exclusively digital. Many entities in the state of Nevada are exclusively online submittals, need digital signatures and that sort of thing. And it can be a steep learning curve moving that direction, but I think it pays you back in security and speed and that sort of thing. So the bottom line here is B, the licensee believes you have adequate protection in place. So something with some sort of password to do this. But we did have a lot of questions about, am I doing this right? So what it is and what it is not. A digital signature is not taking a picture of your seal, a signature, and typing a date. That's basically an electronic, that's like a Xerox. That's just simply scanning something and submitting it. It has no security. Anybody can copy and paste and bootleg that. So a digital signature, you're going to use something like Adobe or Bluebeam. Most of the entities and big firms are using Bluebeam. You create a digital seal, signature. It requires a password. And then it gets some metadata attached to it so the entities know that this was properly done. And it will flag it if it's been modified. It'll say this document's no longer valid. It's been modified. So you can presume someone's tampered with your submittal. So we put together a how-to. So we published a how-to guide during COVID. Many entities still refer to it.
There's also, Ed, let me just jump in another real quick.
Yep.
We just got done producing a video as a companion to that. So,
yep. So same place.
Yep.
Basically, same place. This gives you an example of where that guide is. We now have links to 2 YouTube videos, one for Bluebeam and one using Adobe. And they walk you through, these are actual designers that do this for a living. So board staff talks a lot about it, but we went right to people that do this for a living. And I think we have a civil engineer and electrical engineer, and they walk you through how to save your seal or create a seal. There's a template out there. Even our website has a template for creating your digital seal. How to apply your signature, an actual copy of your signature, and save the whole thing. So we have this for Bluebeam and Adobe. Those are the 2 most common. And they walk you through. They're about 14 minutes total. And it's both versions. They've been peer reviewed. It's pretty useful information. So I highly recommend you check that out if you ever have an issue. Turns out we had some entities too that said, I heard the terms thrown around, but we weren't sure if what we were getting complied. The review technician wasn't positive. So we just had a case of fraud in Elko, city of Elko. They got 3 sets of plans, one stamped by a civil, one a mechanical, and one a architect. And the plans examiner said, I'm no expert on this digital signature, but something doesn't look right. It's a small home builder. He's got these home plans that came in for review, and something's not right. And so they verified the licensees, and they were correct. All 3 were fraudulent. None of the 3 had anything to do with the job. So we notified the 2 engineers, and we CC'd the architect. I don't have any purview over architects, but the architect was thankful for the involvement because we do have a standard and the Board of Architects doesn't. They don't have a required standard. So my understanding is many architects follow the Board of Engineers and Land Surveyors program, as do the water rights surveyors. But, we tracked it down to, it was an online, it was a web page where you hire, gig workers, where you can pay hourly for graphic artists, layout, design. And these guys forged seals. They looked up engineers and an architect that were licensed in Nevada and just scribbled a name and duplicated the whole thing. But they weren't digital signatures. There was no metadata. And so we sent them all a cease and desist letter. They all turned their accounts off. They probably will resurface with a new username. But this just happened just in the last, since the start of this year, 3 different people impersonated. So then the entity went backwards, looking at all those drawings, making sure they were valid engineers and architects. And it cost the builder a lot of time. He thought he was saving some money doing this online with someone he had never met, and it blew up in his face. It delayed his projects. I think the entity submitted a complaint to the contractors board because it's his responsibility to be 100% complete when he submits construction documents, and they weren't. So anyway, valuable lesson there. So changes to the law. We've currently got a legislative session going on. All these changes that are listed are mostly repeals. I think we added 3 items and deleted about 7 more. And so you can read these. A lot of them are about veterans, active members of armed forces, on licensure, exam requirements, and then a lot of repeals for things that were either out of date or duplicative. There's one on here I wanted to mention. NAC 625420. If you are inactive or retired, you're probably not at the seminar today, but inactive and retired, we used to just have inactive, and now we have retired. We have 2 classifications, and it's basically, one is I'm not practicing right now, but I might. And the other is I think I'm retired and I won't practice, so I'm not going to do any PDHs. There's a definition there that gives you a choice. So if depending if you want to put your license on inactive status, so or you want to list yourself as retired. So anyway, read those if it applies to you. Next is additional amendments. A lot of these were references to the other statutes, to the NRS that were removed. These are all the NAC regulations. Like I said, legislature's meeting right now, so none of these are this year changes. That will happen later if there's any new laws that affect us. There's a couple of bills that may or may not affect the board and license and registrants. So if you want an easy reference, on our website, well, you can see it there under statutes and regulations. We have the listing that covers the Nevada coordinate system for the surveyors, and then and property corners, and then NRS and NAC 625 that cover those codes and statutes. Easy way to find them. I just bookmarked the state's website because it's got so many. It's also got the lookup for licensed engineers, and we'll soon have the lookup for the firms. We have firm registration, and right now you have to verify with the board staff, and we've got a new application about to roll out. Derek's been working on, so you'll be able to look up firms and who their engineer and responsible charge is and that sort of thing.
One thing on the statutes and regs on our site, just to let everybody know, I get this question sometimes. They are the most current. They literally link to the legislature's website, so that they are absolutely up to date and current.
Gotcha. Versus when you get the book, it's
Yep.
current when we print it. And then if
Yep.
there's any adjustments, I wrote the date on mine, June of 23.
Yeah.
So I think I got the last version, and then they were making these changes and taking things out. And if there's anything that comes out of this legislative session, we made a conscious decision to print a small number because we knew we were going into a legislative session, so that if there's big changes, we will print them again because we'll get lots of requests. So thanks for that, Derek. You're right. You go right to the link and it takes you right to the legislature's website with the latest version, the latest language as adopted. And it also gets you the as adopted. So if I click on the next one, Senate Bill 78 seeks to combine, or it sought to combine some boards. This is currently being discussed in the legislature. So it was going to combine, the proposal was to combine a lot of boards, not just engineers or surveyors, but as a method to streamline government and efficiency, and the governor's all about that. I believe he's a department head of business and industry, was put in charge, or would be in charge. And the recommendation was to combine engineers and surveyors with architects, interior decorators, residential designers, and health inspection professionals. I can't remember their exact title. So they do a lot of like health district inspection type of things. And so it would have shrunk the board, but like quadrupled the scope and breadth of information. So we said, that's awkward. We have 4 civils just to cover the bulk of civil on the board. We have 2 surveyors, 4 civils, an electrical, a structural. One of the board members is a civil that does geotech, one does environmental, one does mining. So how could we cover also architecture, buildings, interiors, residential designers, and the medical professionals? So it's been amended. If you take a picture of that link or
It's on our website too.
Okay, it's on our website. There you go. The latest version, we have a position paper. Our board is appointed by the governor. So we don't really disagree with the governor's approach to be good for business and streamline government. But at the same time, we want to make sure we protect the public and we can properly regulate a very complicated industry, right? It's very diverse. So anyway, SB 78 is out there. There's a new assembly bill that potentially works to our advantage, that gives the boards some opportunity to join for IT and HR services. I think the medical industry brought it up, but they said this should apply to all boards if you need these services. So we may get some of that streamlined government without combining with another board that would potentially dilute our expertise. What we didn't want to have is inadequate coverage for structural engineering, electrical engineering, surveying, that sort of thing. If you get a complaint or an applicant that says, trust me, I can do that, you want a staff and a board member, without getting into the weeds. If we get those applicants, like Derek said, we get an applicant or they are a potential applicant and they have questions, we want an expert to answer their questions and say, yes, you can do that in Nevada, and here's what you need to do to get licensed. And if you do all that, we turn licenses around very quickly. We do not want to be in the way of business doing business. So if you're bringing someone from out of state that provides some expertise you need in a Nevada office, we want them to get licensed quickly and be able to go to work, and protect the public, take care of business. So to that effect, we try to be efficient. The bill talks about savings. In the case of the Board of Engineers and Land Surveyors, we have absolutely no state budget. This is all funded by your dues. We think we spend your money wisely. We haven't raised dues in forever and a day. In fact, we lowered application fees and that sort of thing a few years ago. So we've been very fiscally conservative, and we update our software when we need to, but we have no frivolous spending. So I'll move on. We can't advocate for or against the bill. We're trying to educate. So if you're concerned or you're interested, please take a look at it. Submit your own comments in your own words. If you love it or hate it, tell them. It's making its way through the legislature right now. And next, we have
Yes.
about 15 minutes. So do you want to email Derek or you would rather have him in the chat?
So let's do this. Hang tight on the screen for just a second. That's my
Okay.
email up there. My email is also on the website underneath board. The board link, you'll see board, and then under that, you'll see staff. It's available there. So if you can't grab it from this screen, go to our website and it's available there as well. So yes, if you have questions, probably the most efficient way to do it is just to email me, because then I can reach out to Ed or Steve or Mark, with specifics. If you're down in the weeds on a question, I can ask for their input and get you a thorough answer. But while we're here, I usually open it up to a handful of questions through chat. I've already got one
Okay.
question in there. Ed, I'll read it to you.
Well, hang on a sec. Before we
Go
get to that, we still have a little bit of content. So let me go forward and we'll come right back to this.
Actually, I don't think so. I think this is it.
No. Well, first of all, Derek mentioned Steve. Steve Heiner's the other part-time guy. We're both part-time doing investigations and compliance and code type things. Steve has the 2-hour ethics seminar tomorrow. Does that start at noon as well? Is that noon to?
It's 11:30 Pacific time,
Okay.
11:30 to 1:30.
1:30. It's 2 hours long. Steve's done the ethics presentation a number of times. He's a recognized expert. He's done it for a lot of organizations. And then real quick, we are recording this.
Yes.
So the recording will be available. Here's the info on the recording. If that was going to be your question, how do we get back to it? And I said in my notes, if you want to watch it again, nobody wants to watch this twice. But if you have a coworker or a peer, and this is where we're all in this together, right? As licensed professionals, if you see something that's not appropriate, and you wonder if it's your business to formally complain, a lot of times people they see something they know is not right, but they don't want to complain. First step, you could forward this to them and say, hey, you should watch this. But second, you can make an informal inquiry. Just call the board number or send the board email. It's board, right? It's board@nvbpels.nv.gov. You can just send an email and say, this is what I saw. I don't know if it's right. Sometimes board staff lodges the complaint because you're in an awkward spot and it's like, I'm not comfortable lodging a complaint, but and our company policy, it has to come from the vice president or the regional manager or the director or whatever. And a lot of times they're never going to have the bandwidth or the direct knowledge to lodge the complaint. And the staff doesn't feel empowered to just call. So if you see something you don't like, you've heard this before, see something, say something, do something. So send them the video and say, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, you should watch this. Or call us, and then here's the certificate.
Yeah, let me. I'll give you the spiel on this. So, as Ed's pointed out, this is a certificate. So, I do this at the end of all. So this is the 7th time we've presented this webinar, and I give the same explanation at the end of each one of these. I know a lot of you are licensed in other states that hammer you pretty hard if you don't provide adequate proof that you attended a PDH activity. Nevada is pretty informal or casual maybe about, it's the honor system. So if you say, all you're required to provide when you renew your license is just report the number of hours that you did. It's up to you to keep track of certificates, any kind of written proof, that sort of thing. We will not ask for it unless you are audited. So you definitely want to keep track of your activities, but you can do it in any format that works for you. A simple PowerPoint or a simple Excel file will work. I highly encourage or recommend that you also use your NCEES record. There's a CPC area on your record where you can store your PDH activity so that if you are audited, all you have to do is send us the link and that'll be good for proof. But if you would still like a certificate, I I will have one available that I can email you, or you can simply do a screenshot of this and save that to your file. So I'll leave this up for a minute or two and give everybody an opportunity to do that. What else do I want to say? No. Yeah, the videos, a second ago, Ed showed that. So if you go to the continuing education page on our website, and that is the page underneath engineers and land surveyors, the first link, you'll see a continuing education page. All of the information about the current webinars, past webinars, and future webinars will be there. And give me a day or two and I will have links to this video will be posted there. And like Ed said, if a colleague wasn't able to attend live, tell them to watch the video and they count just the same. Are they exactly the same? No, there's, regulation updates. SB 78 was new this time. So there will be, it's best if you can watch the most recent one, you'll get the most current information, but they all count the same for your renewal. So that's that. Do you want to go through a couple questions, Ed?
Yes. And the other thing is,
Yeah.
you can follow us on Facebook.
Oh, look at you.
Formerly known as Twitter, Instagram. We got because of Derek, we have a great social media presence, and we try to get that information out there. You don't have to follow all of them; you'll get a lot of content, but the board does, try to keep up with all the content out there. So
yep.
We do social media updates when there's any sort of press release or changes, because not everybody's looking at our website every day, but it may show up on their Facebook feed or their LinkedIn or whatever. So, whatever your preference is. So yeah, if you have any questions, let it rip.
Okay. Got a couple minutes. Let's see. We got one here. It's hard to read on this little chat screen here. Let me see if I can stretch this out. Okay, there we go. The question is, yes, oh dear. Sorry, I thought I was ready and now my screen moved. That's why I say it's best to email me, but that's okay. Can a licensed civil engineer from our office provide a site visit observation for a project in which the drawings were stamped by a structural engineer, assuming both the civil and structural engineer are licensed in Nevada?
That's a good question. I believe so, because special inspections are not completed by structural engineers. They're either completed by somebody with a certificate or expertise in that area or another design professional. So if it's an observation and you've got approved plan stamped by a structural, I would say yes, but keep in mind, if it's something you get to and you lack the knowledge, don't be afraid to say something, right? Better to say something and ask for clarification than to sign it off and then find out you didn't understand it fully. So generally, yes, field observations don't require, to that point, state law covers as-built drawings. It's a different statute, but as-built drawings can be completed by the design engineer, another engineer, someone that reviewed it in the field, or the contractor. So quite often the as-built itself, simply the notation of the facts, like a field observation, it may not be engineering judgment, it's a statement of the facts. Now, you may need some specialized understanding to gather all those facts. So I would say most likely yes. Without a specific, I would say yes, because there are things that say must be observed or tested or signed off by so-and-so. If it requires a certified welding inspector or structural steel inspector or something. But generally field observations, yes, you'd be okay.
Okay. One quick one on PDHs. I've been retired for 2 years now, and I did 16 PDHs on PDH engineer. Will that be okay? Well, my first response to that is, if you've been retired, you do not have to provide PDH activity. I mean, that is good on you for staying current. And there's two parts to that. If you are retired, you don't have to do the PDHs, but if you ever reinstate, you'll be required to show proof of 30 PDH hours within the most recent 24 months. So if you're not sure and you think, well, I kind of want to hang it up, but there may be a chance that and we get this a lot. A lot of people
Right.
reinstate
You do a
after
little,
retiring.
right, you do a
Yeah.
little consulting.
Right. So it's not a bad idea to stay up in your PDHs, whether you're retired or not. So, let's see, what else do we got here?
You get to go to the rubber chicken circuit, right? Go to a couple of lunch meetings and have chicken and
Yeah,
green beans
right.
and see all your peers and
Right.
yeah.
Can
not a bad idea.
structural observation be performed by a video conference, or do they still require in-person observation?
You know, that's a case by case. There are entities that during COVID went to that and they would say, I need the contractor because we won't put an employee in close proximity. I need whoever installed that thing, right? The contractor to have, the equivalent of FaceTime or, a Zoom meeting in the field. And this has gotten really common. And if you're satisfied, yes, you can satisfy that. That is not governed by the state board. We don't say in responsible charge doesn't mean literally standing there anymore. We used to talk about you had to have a physical building to be able to do business that employed an engineer in that each location. That's changed. You're a registered firm. You could have multiple locations. There's a lot of people working from home or working remotely. And they say, headquarters is here, but we have a presence in Nevada and here's what we do. So that's generally up to the entity. So if the entity says, yes, you can do it with a drone, with the number of photographs, they may have standards for those photographs, that you have the ability, like the digital signature. I need time and date stamps. Some other verifications that this isn't stock photos of bolted connections, for instance. So that's it depends. We don't regulate that, but if the entity says that's a shall do it this way, and you don't do it that way, that could be a valid complaint to the state board, but we're not going to tell you how to do that work. That's going to be between you and the client and the generally that entity where you're building, the city, the county, or the state.
I got one here that's kind of a copyright question. What is the board's stance on ownership of CAD files? Are they considered instruments of service? Considered
the board, I don't
copywritten?
think we have a board position. Here's my understanding, my limited understanding. If you're doing work for, I'm a civil. So if you're doing work that is ultimately approved by a government agency because it's got public improvements, public right-of-way, water, sewer, street, storm drain, whatever it is, you cannot copyright that. That's public domain. When it's done, it's public right-of-way. It's owned by the public at large, managed by that community. If you're doing house plans or some sort of intricate industrial piping and you think you've found a better way to make a mousetrap, there are cases where you could copyright or even patent your layout, your type of connections, whatever. So that's a case by case. I mean, we generally, as a board, we don't weigh in on that. It's not covered by NRS and NAC, but we have had people say, I refuse to send a CAD file for electronic submittal to a government entity because it's my intellectual property. And it's like, it's a street and a sewer pipe. At the end of the day, the government entity is going to own it and maintain it and operate it. That's not an intellectual property. You're designing public improvements on behalf of a client that is doing that generally as a trade for an approval of some type. They want a business license or a use permit or an approval for something. So that's a case by case. Generally, I mean, copyright doesn't fall under NRS, so we wouldn't get involved in a copyright violation so much as if there was clearly one engineer that was out stealing things, we would probably tell them it's an ethical violation, but not a participant in copyright law.
All right. We are 1 minute over our
Okay.
allotted 1 hour. So Ed, I know you couldn't see your your clock on your
Nope,
computer. So
my phone just went to 1 PM. So,
all right. Well, anyway, thank you everyone for attending today. Like I said, if you have any questions, go ahead and email them directly to me. I'll get you an answer. And we'll do this again. We're doing Ed's tomorrow. We will be
no,
doing,
Steve tomorrow
or sorry,
and
Steve's tomorrow.
me in 6 months.
And
If you
then
didn't get
you,
a note.
yeah, exactly. We will do this again in the November, December timeframe. So I'll have that updated, and you'll probably get an email or from us at some point leading up to that. So until then, we'll have a good one, and we'll talk to you at the next one.
Thank you, Derek.
Thanks, Ed. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
All right.